Coming up on this episode of Off the Fence, will we dissect Bob Olinger at Punchestown? Were we pleased with him or were we a little bit underwhelmed? We also get stuck into Dysart Dynamo. Where's he going to go? Supreme or Ballymore? Well, Tony Keenan has backed him for one and has some strong thoughts on that. On top of that, we've obviously got tracker time for you and some viewers' questions. And Tony also takes a good look at the Ryanair and has a bet for you in that, or a horse he fancies anyway. So plenty coming up on this episode of Off the Fence. Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Off the Fence. This is, as you know by now, your go-to digital jumps programme. We look back, we look forward, we tip you a few winners, we give you a few tracker horses. The show is jam-packed even at this relatively slow time in the jump season. And before I go any further, I have to ask you, because my producer makes me, please hit subscribe on our YouTube channel, because that way you won't miss a single episode of Off the Fence as we build up to the Cheltenham Festival and beyond. And every week I am joined by Barry Geraghty and Tony Keenan. We've got loads to get through this week, but a quick check-in with the boys. Barry, to you first. How are you over there?
No, very good, Vanessa. Enjoyed the weekend's racing and looking forward to our chat.
Good. And Tony, have things perked up since last week? You weren't feeling on tip-top form.
No, I was just I had a bit of COVID the last week, so that I'm grand. I'm much better now. No, and like that, I've actually quite enjoyed the January racing so far. Like Barry's saying, I think sometimes because there's maybe a lack of it and the racing can be a little bit uncompetitive, there's a tendency to overreact to horses being impressive. But I think we actually have seen two genuinely impressive horses at Punchestown on Sunday, and ones that will be able to carry that form forward.
Okay, well, without further ado then, let's get stuck straight into our What Happened Where section. And as Tony has already mentioned, we're going to head straight over to Punchestown and take a look at Bob Olinger, because he goes to Punchestown, he's making his second chase start, and he essentially hacks up. There seems to be a bit of a difference of opinion with a few people about whether they were incredibly impressed with him or a little bit underwhelmed. I think I might be in the latter category. Barry, where do you sit with Bob Olinger, having seen him win at the weekend?
I thought he was good. I thought he jumped well. He settled the score there anyway. Jumped nicely, travelled well through the race. You could argue that he laboured a little bit from 2 out. It took him a while to get by Cappadano, who isn't a bad horse and would have been a good winner in Nace had he not nearly fallen at the second last previously. So he is a good horse, but I would have expected a little bit more from Bob Olinger, but I think a lot of that's ground related. He's a very low action if you look at him. Really good mover, and for me it's not unusual for a horse who handles soft ground to need better ground over fences. There's just a little bit more effort involved in jumping a fence, so I think he's going to be better again when we see him on better ground.
Ground angle, very interesting indeed. Tony, would you concur with that? He's even money at the moment for the Cheltenham Festival, for the Turners Novices Chase. Would you be with him, against him? How impressed?
Happy enough to sit that race out at the moment. Yes, he was impressive, very impressive. Maybe not so much. His jumping is fine. It's not. It's the jumping of a 2.5 mile horse rather than one maybe that wants to go back to 2. He can be a little bit big at times. But he just has loads of speed in between the fences, I suppose, is the big thing. He does have this kind of slightly wonky head carriage, but I don't think there's anything new about that. He had that in Goran when Fernie Hollow beat him. He had it in the Ballymore last year. And maybe when he gets into a race when he is coming up against a horse that is, of comparable ability to him, and that they get into a battle from 2 out, you might see that holding back a little bit, but it could be a while before he meets a horse of comparable ability. He hasn't. Fernie Hollow, I suppose, is the only one he's met so far. He lost that one, I suppose, but he's kind of horse again that's going to scare others off at Cheltenham, just like Envy Allen did last year. So, well, maybe the lesson from that is that maybe they shouldn't be scared off. They should be willing to have a go. And Henry de Brum had mentioned after the race that he was thinking of the Dublin Racing Festival, but it was with that important proviso about the ground, and I probably got a little bit excited when he mentioned that, but it's not looking good on the ground front. Just looking at met.ie website there, there's no real rain around Dublin forecast into early next week, so yeah, it's probably more likely to be straight to Cheltenham for him. But I was really impressed actually with the second horse there, Cappadano. I wouldn't underestimate him. I really like when these JP McManus horses are ridden forward. Actually, I don't know. I know it's not that common, but I think the reason with him being ridden forward there was because he is actually a bit of a stayer, and I think the taking out of the 3 fences down the back was probably more against him, because it brought stamina into play would probably suit him more than Bob Olinger, who's that bit faster than him. The Capodanno, he certainly wasn't losing any ground on Bob Olinger from the last. He was closing the gap a little bit. I think he's a big player in that 3-mile race, the Festival Novice Chase. I know they've already got the anti-post favourite and stuff like that, but I just think getting this horse has done over 2.5 miles. He's definitely going to be better up and trip. His form took off last spring when he got the good ground at Fairyhouse and Punchestown, and also he got the combination of the 3 miles and the better ground. So yeah, I think he's got a right chance in that race. Galloping the Champs obviously looked absolutely amazing at Christmas, but everything has its price. And I do think this horse is an interesting one and one to keep in mind for that race.
Okay, so Capodanno getting the positive nod for the 3-mile better ground championship novice race, and then both of you seem pretty pleased generally with Bob Olinger over the 2.5. Jimmy R has asked, and Barry, this one's going to come your way, I think. We have got question time a little bit later on in the show, but we're going to also intertwine some questions as we go. And Jimmy R has asked, are you taking on Bob Olinger for the Marsh, the Turners? Could other horses be in with a shout? Lahon Press looked impressive at Cheltenham last time, and I wouldn't say Bob Olinger is unbeatable. #off the fence. Thank you very much, Jimmy, for your question. What would you respond to that, Barry?
Yeah, Lahon Press was good, and he seems to be horses on the up. But just the level of form that Bob Olinger showed last year to win the Ballymore. And I'm happy with his jumping, and I think on better ground he'd be better again. So I wouldn't be taking him on unless Galloping the Champ lined up in this race.
Ooh, curveball there from Barry. Okay, well, Jimmy, I hope that has answered your question sufficiently. Let's move on to the other big race at Punchestown on Sunday, which was, of course, the Moscow Flyer, a race that Willie Mullins has farmed before, and he farmed it again this time with Dysart Dynamo, absolutely tearing the field apart and bolting up, quite literally bolting up. He is now 9-2 for the Supreme and 5-1 for the Ballymore. Now, Tony, coming to you first with this one, would you have any interest with him at anything more than 2 miles at this stage?
Personally, no. Look, I'll give full disclosure. I'm financially involved in this. I backed him for the Supreme straight after this race. Couple of reasons. The first reason is, I think initially he was kind of 3-1 for the Ballymore and 6-1 for the Supreme, and the initial impression was I'll be very surprised if he does go for the longer race. Now I know it's Willie Mullins, and I'm not going to spend the next couple of months obsessing about what Willie Mullins is going to do, but he to me looks a fast horse that ran round a speed 2 miles at Punchestown, that did an awful lot of his running paired the times in the first 3 quarters of the race, and he's not really a trainer that likes upping them and trip. For the sake of it, if they're going well at 2 miles, why go further and things like that. There has been a little bit of a history of him running horses over 2 miles and then going up to the Ballymore, but that's more in the past than recent times. York Hill would have been successful in doing that. Michael Dagenham 5-3, but most of his winners of this race kind of kept to the kind of Supreme trip. And my second reason for backing him is probably quite an obvious one again. Is look, I had no one involved in it beforehand. Constitution Hill and John Bond both been very impressive, but they're both English. And the reality is that the Irish form was, I hope, in theory, underestimated in the market, and considering how dominant Ireland have been. He was the outsider of those 3. So I just said yes. I think that's maybe worth a few quid. I do think there's a bit of substance to this performance on Sunday. First of all, he's jumped better than Cork, which was a big thing. The time is excellent. I think he's coming out the best on time figures of the novice hurdler so far, especially at that trip. Some of the sort of fancied horses ran no races, and I actually should give a plus to Bob Olinger. His big impressive win there on Sunday is coming at a time when Henry de Rommets are not going well. Like, he did a number of short price disappointments again at the weekend, so that's a plus to him. But if you looked at the race beforehand of his dangers, you probably would have said Gringo Dobrel was most likely to run his race. He's had plenty of experience. He's been over and back to England. He's run to a good level. And he's beaten him, I think, 19 lengths, and that horse beaten 10.5 lengths in the shallow hurdles. So I thought that was a really good sign. And the other pointer is, and this I'd be quite believing that this is going to be, because I'd be convinced that Dysart Dynamo is going to be better and better ground. All his pedigree, the dam was, I think, one on the flat. The half-sister is Dysart Diamond, I think is her name. She doesn't really go a yard on soft ground. He was good in Clonmel doing things wrong on his bumper last year, but then just took off at Punchestown, and that was a really deep bumper when he won in Punchestown when he got the bit of better ground. Like, there were, she's 100 rated flat horses back down the field, and that trained by Jessica Harrington and stuff like that. But so yeah, I would make him a little bit shorter for the Supreme, maybe put him in between Constitution Hill and John Bond. Thinks that, as you know, I'm not the greatest fan of Sir Gerhard. I know some people are fancying him. That's totally fine, just not for me at the moment. So yeah, I like them. And one of the big angles will be the better ground.
Love that. Haven't heard that angle. It's specifically about his pedigree as well, Tony. Very interesting stuff from you. Barry, throwing this ball over to you then now. Obviously, we've got a rat in the count with Tony backing a horse against Constitution Hill, but let's just move on from that, shall we? At the Races did a poll on Twitter that got a huge response asking whether you'd run Dysart Dynamo in the Supreme or the Ballymore. Listening to Tony, you would be completely convinced, and having watched the race as well, by the way, to run him in the Supreme. I was all about the Supreme. Only marginally came out on top. 59% Supreme vote, final vote. 41% of people voted to run him in the Ballymore. I know we just don't know what Willie Mullins is going to do, but he's had horses like Vitor, Min and Duvan win the Moscow Flyer and go on to the Supreme. Where would your mind be at with this horse? And specifically actually from a jockey's point of view, obviously a lot has been focused in with this horse, Barry, about how strong he was. It was a runaway victory, quite literally. Is that any concern to you at this stage?
It wouldn't be a concern at 2 mile, but over further it would. And especially down the back, he seemed to open up down the back straight and extend and stretch the field. You know, if he does that after going a mile in a 2.5 mile race, he's going to struggle to get home. So I don't think his style of racing suits going up on trip just yet. So I'd be surprised if they go further than 2. And I'm sure if they were to split them, Sir Gerhard, having been a point-to-point winner, he'd have no problem stepping up on trip. And even his style of racing would be more laid back. So that wouldn't be an issue for him if they were going to go for that option.
Okay, and just a quick question to wrap up the Dysart Dynamo section from Kieran Catterton, who asked if you had the choice of any ride, we better throw this to Barry seeing as he is the ex-jockey, but I think I know where this is going to go. If you had the choice of any ride in the Supreme, as things stand, which horse would you be getting the leg up on, Barry Geraghty?
Well, that'll be obvious, Constitution Hill, but you know, you haven't seen the ceiling with these horses. John Bond will be interested to see what he does at the weekend, but Dysart Dynamo, if Constitution Hill wasn't around, you'd be very happy to ride him.
Absolutely. Just a quick side note, actually, Barry, whilst we have you on the topic. This looks like, obviously, look, it's the curtain raiser of the festival. Everyone's at a high state of excitement by the first race on the Tuesday in March. Just from a jockey's point of view, going into a red-hot Supreme like that, is that one of the sort of real high points of the season? Like, when you're going down to post for that race, I know it's only a novice hurdle, but there must be, specifically when it's a deep race and everyone fancies their chances, that must be a real crackling sort of atmosphere, is it?
Oh, definitely. You know, it'd be eggshells in the wearing beforehand. Just a brilliant buzz and anticipation, everything. So no, when you have a hot race like this, it's a great way to kickstart the festival.
Nice, yeah, I can imagine that. God, I hope loads of them line up. I hope Constitution Hill wins. Sorry, Tony, sorry, but I kind of do. I've got behind him. Let's move on to Kempton at the weekend. We saw Mr. Fisher win the Sylvian Arco chase there, Barry. For me, he picked up the pieces in what was a weak enough race. I know the race course and also the sponsor were a little bit disappointed in the turnout. And then in terms of the race itself, for me, it slightly fell apart on the day. But James Bowen was probably one of the stories of the day, obviously winning later with Caribbean Boy as well. And I know you wanted to give him a special mention, maybe not specifically about the horses, but the rider.
Yeah, well, he gave Mr. Fisher a beautiful ride, rode him with plenty of confidence, let the first 2 horses go off, gave them a bit of a head start, produced them down between the last 2. Lovely ride, kept it simple. But Caribbean Boy in particular, rode him handy, was top weight, didn't commit off the turn in. He nursed him down the straight, missed the second last, missed the third last, flew the second last. But just Kempton is a real speed track, and those last fences, it's to get those inch perfect. You're meeting it on the right stride, how much pressure you put on to push your horse forward. You can overdo that very easily. And I just thought it was a beautiful, the precision he had the last fence, the stride he had, it was perfect. It got the momentum over the fence. He went from being a half length down to a half length up, and he wins by a length or more. So I just thought it was a brilliant bit of horsemanship, real top class riding.
There's a lot of talk at the moment, Barry, about him and, Nico de Boinville road winners for Nicky Henderson at the weekend, but of course James Bowen did too, potentially on horses that Nico might have ridden. And there's a bit of talk about that sort of changeover. I don't really want to engage in that at this stage because I think Nico's still very much in the number one spot. But just in terms of, Nicky Henderson incredibly well, Barry, James Bowen as a sort of person and a rider, do you feel like he'll be a very good fit for Seven Barrows long term potentially?
He's a very good fit for anyone wherever he goes, but he does ride as it is a second jockey arrangement, I think, with Simon Eyre and Isaac Suwaid, and something similar then with the Potter family. So there is connection with owners is probably more the reason than anything. Nicky is very much behind Nico, and Nico is a top class rider, as he has proved.
Yeah, absolutely. Tony, let's move on to a bit of Ryanair chat, because of course after Mr. Fisher won at the weekend, a lot of people might fancy his chance in the Ryanair. For me, he's short of top notch at that real grade 1 level, championship level. I think he sort of makes hay whilst the sun shines, and a few other horses aren't taking him on. But where would your head be at with Mr. Fisher and the Ryanair and the way the race is looking as a whole?
You're probably correct that he isn't good enough in a very competitive grade 1, but I'm just wondering, is the Ryanair going to be that race this year? Just for one point, just about Mr. Fisher, I would make, he does seem to be much better in a small field. The jockey was keeping him wide there, even in the 4-runner race on Saturday, but his figures in facing 8 runners or fewer is 1-1-2, 1-1-1, U-2-1. So when he does get into that small field, he runs his race. And the Ryanair, the last 5 years in terms of field size, just come back last year first, has been 11, 8, 12, 6 and 8. So it is, the setup might be okay for him. Now there's 36 entered in the race at the moment, but as ever, a lot of those won't run. Now just looking at the market there, like if you're looking at the top 8 who may or may not all be certain runners at the moment, you've got Allaho, St Calvados, Shan Blue, Facorduderi, Janadil, Envoy Allen, Mr. Fisher and Asterion Forlange. Adding up the general percentages of those horses just the market, they're only coming out at 85%, so I wouldn't put anyone off having a bet in that race at the moment. It's probably a decent race for a bet in terms of what's the likely runners versus what way they're betting at the minute. And I just wonder, for all how impressive he was in it last year, is Allaho maybe a favourite that you could be taking on? And I'm saying that not in terms of ability at all, because we know that he's absolutely probably streets ahead of these in terms of his ability level. But I just would wonder a little bit about his preparation. To me, he's a horse that thrives on racing a little bit. When he went into Cheltenham the first year for the Albert Bartlett, he had 2 runs beforehand. I thought it was inexperienced as much as anything that caught him out. The same when he went for the RSA, lacked maybe a bit of experience, was only coming back at Christmas time having his first run. Now last season, when they got 3 runs into him, like he went dismal on his first run, a bit better at Christmas, then pretty good at Taurus, and then dominant at Cheltenham. I thought that was the preparation that was key to him. They kind of got any bit of freshness out of him, they got him very fit, things like that. But they're not going to be able to do that this year because things have kind of transpired against him. They ran him in the John Dorkin. He got this harder race than they wanted. They're now talking about going there fresh. He has a poor record first time out. Now, I know he won this year, but he wasn't at his very best, and he was probably a fortunate winner if the grey horse had stood up. So I just wonder, that could be a reason after the event that they look and they say, well, preparation wasn't ideal. Getting a couple of more runs into him might have been optimal. Now the horse that interests me, I have backed this horse again just after the entries came out. I think St Calvados is a really interesting runner in this. I give Mr. Fisher actually a bit of a life too, but St Calvados has run a screamer in the King George there, and look, he got a very inefficient ride, made his move.
Tony, you're being very kind there with the word inefficient, the phrase inefficient ride, but I'll let that pass.
Well, look, they went too hard in the early part of the race, obviously, and a very good piece on the website just from Simon Rowlands about this, and then the pace kind of slowed a little bit, and then there was more pace injected by Gavin Sheehan on St Calvert. So they were going too hard, slowed up, and then he went too hard again, which didn't show the horse obviously the best effect. But he probably doesn't stay that trip anyway. But he shipped really well for the view to a horse come back down and trip. Two other big positives with him is he's already run really well in the race before. Split Min and A Plutard a couple of years back, and could make a case that he should have finished closer that day. He got in some trouble in running in the straight there. And also, to be quite frank, he's after getting the mother and father trainer upgrades as well here. But you're going from a trainer who would train the odd Grade 1 winner to someone who has, dominated Grade 1 middle distance and staying chasers in UK for the last 15 or 20 years. And it's given him the win surgery and stuff like that. Now, I believe he's going to Ascot for the 2 mile 5 race or 2 mile 6 race. I actually wouldn't mind him to go straight to the Ryanair, because he did have a hard race at Campton and that would be a worry. But I think ability wise, he could be second best in. And is this maybe a time where Allaho isn't going to run to his peak? Maybe just turn up and he just do what he did last year, and it's perfectly credible that he will. But just at the price, I think St Calvados has a chance.
Very interesting indeed, and I hear your points, Allaho. He's a big burly horse. It's no surprise that he takes a few races to get rocking and rolling, so those are definite question marks. Barry, let's move on very quickly to the Pertemps qualifier. Sporting John obviously winning the Pertemps qualifier at Warwick at the weekend. Would you have any interest in him in the Pertemps final come the Cheltenham Festival? Where's your view on him at the moment? Obviously, if he was to go there, he'd be absolute top weight, I believe, and it might be a bit of a struggle for him, but he's still clearly got a huge engine, this horse. Slightly frustrating, I think, from my point of view.
Yeah, he was very impressive first run back at the start of the season. Then he got beaten in Cheltenham next start, but was really good in Warwick at the weekend. Probably not the strongest run race, and I think he benefited from that because his class really showed, but the handicap is going to hit him hard. He's going to go to 160 or thereabouts, which is going to put him top weight. So does he go there, or does he run in the Stairs hurdle where he's probably 3 or 4 pound wrong with Champ and the likes of those? So that's a bit of a tricky one. He could go to the Pertemps and maybe claim off him, would be an option, but that penalty is the biggest issue he has.
Okay, and Tony, you wanted to give a quick mention to Winterfog's entry in the Lanzarote. That pricked your ears, didn't it?
Yeah, just probably significant with a view to the Pertemps. He was off 128 in the qualifier at Leopardstown. He put up the 131 off the back of that. His UK mark on Saturday was to be 138. Now, of course, that may be upped in between now and March, depending on how the form works out or how he runs himself. But that would qualify him for the race, like any of the recent years. Like the last 5 years, the bottom weight was 126 last year. Now, that was an outlier year with COVID and maybe people not running horses as opposed to previous years. The 4 years prior to that, 131, 134, 137 and 135. So he would get in, I think, off his mark at the moment. Panda Boy there, who beat him at Leopardstown, another interesting horse for that. He's 136 in irons. Maybe thinking he's going to be 141, 142. Like if Sporting John was running off a big weight in the high 150s, 160, like he'd be leaving them on lovely racing weights, I would say. Beautiful weights, to be honest, and the Leopardstown qualifier not always, but in recent years has been the key qualifier, and looked another really competitive run of it this year.
Yeah, look, very strong indeed. Plenty of noteworthy horses out of that. Sticking with a bit of Leopardstown chat, obviously the Dublin Racing Festival entries are out. First weekend in February. Huge amount of excitement. Fingers crossed that the ground somehow, by some sort of miracle of the rain gods, comes up okay and we see a few of these horses. But Barry, just a quick flick through the entries. Who caught your eye in the entries list in any division?
Well, I suppose if you were to look at the entries for the Chanel Pharma Champion Hurdle, Appreciate is in there, but I'm sure he will have other options, maybe the Red Mills Hurdle. But if he was to turn up there, it would be interesting. Honeysuckle, Zana here, Charge is there as well, albeit he struggles at this meeting a little bit. But it'll be interesting to see Zana here against Honeysuckle on soft ground. You'd imagine the hurdle track's usually slower than the chase track, so that obviously works against, or has worked against Sharjah in the past. But if by chance Appreciate was to turn up here, it would be interesting.
Okay, and Tony, same question to you. Anything that in the initial entry stage really you were surprised by? Obviously loads of points of interest, but anything that surprised you?
Yeah, Willie Mullen's been a bit stubborn now, not even entering a boom photo in the Irish Gold Cup. I thought stood out. Like, we've 18 runners, and I thought he'd get, like, it's not like him not to even give him an entry. 18 runners in total at that. Like we'll see him any turn up. That was, like, I'd say, we're surprised with the good entry, but already Gordon Elliott has ruled Galvin out. Thought Maudida was an interesting runner, an interesting entry at least in that. Like, as I've said before, I think 3 miles is going to see her to even better effect. A couple of interesting maybe horses on reclamation projects in that. Clat the Rear had an entry, and also the horse that won the Paddy Power handicap chase last season, Castlebawn West. I think that's his first entry since he had an injury. Other thing, yeah, God bless Paul Nichols. Like, God bless him, because he's going to add a bit of spice to this meeting. Greenatine seems pretty likely runners. Same with Frodon. I even wonder would he won Run Clandesau, but that'd be magnificent. Like, maybe he wants to keep him fresh for the spring, but like, this is a grade 1. It's going to be worth more money than the Newbury race he ran in last year, so that's interesting too. Look, Gordon Elliott, savage strength again among these juvenile hurdlers. Won with another one today in the first race of Punchestown, did it quite well. He is the grade 1 entry along with the couple of horses from the Brown family. Just to mention there, the champion hurdle, I believe Paul Hennessy is going to give Heaven Help Us a kind of a prep run in that over 2 miles, which I thought was quite interesting. And yeah, look, the 2 mile, one of the most interesting races I think is going to be this 2 mile grade 1 novice hurdle. So Gerhard is in that, and there are, multitude of interesting horses in it. Kieran Mustard is in it, would give a bit of a line on the John Bond form. This horse that won at Tremor, El Fabiola, is interesting. My mate Mozzie is an intended runner, I believe, and a trainer was saying that he's given him a speculative entry in the champion hurdle based on how hot the Supreme is. Gordon Elliott had obviously his pair of horses from Christmas, Mighty Potter and 3 Stripe Life, and then William Muns has all these mares entered, and some of those would possibly have to run there. Like that could be a really good race, and like none of those are even the first 3 in the betting for the Supreme at the minute. Like, it just tells you what a savage race it potentially would be. The other thing I thought that was interesting is that Willie Mullins entered his novice chasers in the grade 1 chase as well, which
it's not
again,
very
unusual.
That's not a very Willie Mullins thing to do, is it?
Very unusual. Look, you would imagine Fernie Hollow, we were talking about him last week, whether he'd run or whether he wouldn't run, maybe would get preference in terms of running in the novice chase. But as I also discussed, like the grade 1, the open grade 1, maybe wouldn't look the strongest race, and would he chance something, one of the novices, not to keep them apart, because it's basically his 2 mile novices versus Riviere de Tel again in the Irish Oracle. So I thought that was quite interesting. Yeah, so I think very good news out of the entries. More positive than I thought it would be, and maybe trainers aren't going to be scared off by the ground as it looked like they might be.
Yeah, very interesting indeed. Obviously on the show we've got 2 shows before then, I think it'll be. Plenty to get stuck into, and we'll be covering that in the build up to the Dublin Racing Festival. And you're right, Tony, God bless Paul Nichols, what a man. Seeks an opportunity and will send a horse. We like that. Let's move on to question time. We've got a good few questions to rattle through. Plenty for you, Barry Geraghty, to earn your keep on this show. Obviously we had loads of questions about Bob Olinger and Dysart Dynamo. We appreciate that, and hopefully we've answered a good few of those in the last 15 minutes or so, but we've picked out a few that aren't about those 2 horses. Well, some of them are actually, including the first one by Adam who sent in. This one's to you, Barry. Which one or 2, if any, of Constitution Hill, John Bond, Dysart Dynamo and Sir Gerhard do you not see running in the Supreme? Where do you stand on that, Barry?
Well, it's very hard to know because all 4 are owned by different owners, but I'd have thought Sir Gerhard would be the most likely if one is going to step away. And then maybe there's a chance of John Bond, but you couldn't say.
Okay, fair. And Tony, I think we already have your views on that in terms of the lowdown you gave us on Dysart Dynamo and our previous discussions on a few of these horses. So we'll move on to Joe Smith's question, which is what are the team's thoughts on Defi Desoy? Is there any way back for him after this sequence of poor performances? Hashtag off the fence. Thank you very much, Joe, for your question. Barry, I guess that's another one to you. He's a very strange horse because he's had poor seasons in the past, but now it seems like he's been on quite a downward slope for a little while now. And for me personally, personally, I'm not sure how you start getting him back from this sort of decline now. Would you be giving up on him altogether at this stage, or do you think that Philip Hobbs will be able to get him back to, well, I don't even want to say anywhere near his best, just winning ways? He didn't even seem like anything was in the game at the weekend. He seemed like he didn't want to be there, to my eye anyway.
No, he was on the back foot a lot of the way. He had a disappointing season a couple of years ago, but Philip's horses were running bad at the time. But Philip's horses have been doing okay this season, and he just hasn't found form. So it's going to be a struggle for him. The only thing he has going for him, he's only turned 9, so he has got age on his side. So I'm sure they're happy maybe to play along. The horse seems well in himself. He's jumping well. He's well. But whatever his issues are, if they can be sorted, there is ability there. So at his age, he's probably worth just persevering, and hopefully he can find some level of form again.
Fingers crossed for him, because he's a very likeable horse. I liked him when he was in his peak. Let's move on. Kieran Catterton has asked, again, it's another one from you, Barry. So really, this question time is actually all about Barry Geraghty, which is fine, because Tony Keenan earns his keep on this show week in, week out, whereas Barry, well, The Stairs is another intriguing race. Who would you rather be on, Barry? Champ or Classical Dream? And I ask you to answer this question from a non-biased opinion. Obviously, we know you have a relationship with Champ. Take that out of it. Who would you like to be on when the tapes go up in the Stairs Hurdle come Cheltenham? Champ or Classical Dream?
Yeah, I suppose it's a very tricky one, because Classical Dream is a difficult horse. You saw what he did in Leopardstown. That won't be ideal if he does that in Cheltenham, I think, which would play into Champ's strengths. But on the flip side of that, Champ had a brilliant run in Ascot. He had a brilliant run last season in the Game Spirit on his return, and then he went to the Gold Cup and he flopped. So Champ really needs to produce his Ascot run and the improvement that you would imagine should come from that, because if he turns up in the form that he was in Cheltenham last year, that won't be much good. But I would slightly go with Champ, because if he's there healthy, he's more straightforward. And I thought just that Ascot win for a horse who was going to need to run as much as he did was very impressive.
Yeah, so did I. I think I'd side with Champ over Classical Dream at this stage. Kieran, few questions there. Hopefully Barry has answered them well enough for you all. And don't forget, we do have Tony as well. So any other questions for Tony Keenan, we want to hear them. But we know that, he does his bit on this show, it's fair to say. Now it's time to preview the Clarence House chase at Ascot. Of course, we're expecting this big smash up between Energumene and Shishkin. And before we go any further and get the boys' views on the Grade 1 action at Ascot, I should say that it's time for a ticket giveaway, viewers. You could be in with a chance of winning a pair of tickets to Ascot this Saturday. Grade 1 racing could be the race of the season, and to be in with a chance of winning, all you have to do is type win in the comments to this video, and my producer, the one who's very cross to me at the moment, will pick a winner, and you guys will be able to go to Ascot on Saturday. So that's all you have to do. Type win in the comments section, and on top of that, this is just one ticket giveaway. There'll also be another ticket giveaway on Twitter, so keep an eye out for that. If you're very keen to go to Ascot at the weekend, there's plenty of tickets to be won, and you'll want to be there if Energumene and Shishkin show up. So that is a ticket giveaway courtesy of the team behind Off the Fence. Something to look forward to. Let's look ahead to the week ahead, and of course it's all about Energumene versus Shishkin at Ascot in the Clarence House chase. Will it happen? Goodness knows. Everything crossed at this 5-day stage that it is going to happen. Barry, I know we've spoken about this before on this show, but I guess the question is, we can't predict what Willie Mullins is going to do, and Nicky seems very keen on sending Shishkin there after the bit of work on Saturday morning. So let's talk about the race as if it's going to happen, the mashup between the two. Who would you be siding with, quite simply, at this stage? Because I know you're a fan of both.
Yeah, well, I've been a massive fan of Energumene's all last season, and he was the one I really wanted for the Arkle, but that didn't happen. But Shishkin, who I have loved all along, I thought his win in Kempton at Christmas, I thought that was the best I've seen of Shishkin. I thought he was brilliant. So for me, he'd be hard to beat. But if you're going to have a bet in the race, if they line up at the prices they're at, 1-2 Shishkin and 9-4 Energumene, I'd be taking a punt on Energumene, because we haven't seen, these horses, we haven't got to the bottom of them. They're two very, very classy horses. They're as good as there's been in a while. So I'd be taking the 9-4 on Energumene just for value.
Ground concerns, Barry. There's talk about there being no rain between now and Saturday at Ascot. It's very dry over here at the moment. We're getting a frost every night, and I never quite know what that means to racing ground, but I'm not sure it would necessarily be a positive for Energumene, would it?
No, but I'd say the thing with Willie Mullins is that the issue is how quick will Leopardstown be? So does he wait for Leopardstown, or does he go here? So there's a good chance I'd say he's going to take his chance and go here. It won't be as quick in Ascot, I can't imagine, as it could be in Leopardstown, and he'll need to get a run into him. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see him line up.
Okay, and Tony, do you expect this clash to happen? Do you think that they're both going to line up here? And would you have any ground concerns about the Irish Raider?
I don't know if it's going to happen. Hopefully it will. There's been some great game playing going on between the two of them, really. Like Nicky Henderson was getting a speak in early last week, because it's usually Willie Mullins seems to dictate the terms, saying what's running where, and maybe that's what happened with the Tingle Creek. Now I know it transpired Shishkin wasn't able to run, whatever. I don't have a massive strong betting opinion on this. I would have favoured Shishkin, as I have done all along, but as Barry makes the point, like, we're looking at 1-2 and maybe 9-4 now. Does that kind of price suggest that people think Energumene isn't going to run? Possibly, but as Barry has laid out very well there, like what's the alternative if he doesn't run? Leopardstown doesn't seem viable at the moment, especially with the forecast. And also you might think that right-handed track has always suited Energumene pretty well. So yeah, it's a magnificent race to look forward to. I really hope it does happen. You do have some good sort of other horses in it that are quite decent there. First Flow obviously loves Ascot. Maybe the ground will be a little bit on the quick side for him, but hopefully it will happen and we get to see it, and we get to see them meet again at Cheltenham in March, which is just the kind of clash that I think everyone was probably looking forward to last year in the article happening this time round. So look, hopefully.
Yeah, it's a division that let us down last year. Fingers crossed it won't let us down this year. Let's move on, boys, and talk about a quick mention anyway. With any other business, obviously there'll be some smart horses entered in at Ascot at the weekend, and of course we also have the Winter Millions at Lingfield. It goes a jumps card, then a flat card, and then a jumps card. And I suppose the headline horses on the Sunday will be the likes of Bristol Demai, who might like the very heavy ground there at Lingfield, and Fakir Duderijo. Of sending one over from Ireland is of interest, of course. We'll be dissecting that in a week's time, but at this stage we're not entirely sure who's going to run, but there's plenty to look forward to, all live on Sky Sports Racing. Don't forget that. Barry, quick mention to a few other horses that look like they might show up at the weekend away from Lingfield and Ascot. John Bon up at Haydock caught your eye, clearly. I mean, of course he would. But what do we want to see from John Bon at Haydock in terms of as a stepping stone towards the Supreme, if that's going to go, if that's where he's going to go? What would you like to see from him? For me personally, I'd like to see him just be a bit more of a mature horse in general in the paddock, the race and the post-race as well. What would you be looking to see from him, Barry?
Well, I thought he was very good in Ascot last time. He was more relaxed. He jumped really well, which he'd done in Newbury as well, but he seemed a bit more relaxed. He wasn't as keen, so with that run under his belt again, I think you'll see a relaxed performance again. Haydock is a track that will play to his strengths. It's a flat track, sharp. He's lots of speed. Ground is on the soft side, which might just work against that speed. But it looks to be his main danger, and that's going to give us a brilliant line with Constitution Hill. So it's going to be an informative race. But you'd imagine John Bond should be able to cope with Might Eye and cope with him well.
Something to look forward to up at Haydock as well. So there's bits and pieces of good action across the country, in Ireland as well, and here in the UK, plenty to look forward to this weekend. Now it's time for tracker time. I've got in trouble for tipping up a flat horse last time, so I will retract that now. No more flat horses on this show. It's all about the jumpers. My tracker horse for you is Don Levant. We've talked about this horse before on the show. Obviously it ran in Lanzarote at the weekend for the Williams team, with Isabel Williams on top claiming off him. He's reached the career high mark now, but the run at the weekend suggests that there could be still more in the locker off this mark. He was given a very quiet ride. He probably passed a few beaten horses, but I think there's more to come from him. And even, like I say, off this career high mark, I'm not giving up on him just yet. I don't think he's reached his ceiling, and we mentioned him on the show a few weeks back now because Barry was very pleased with the ride that Isabel gave him when he won 2 starts back. So he's just a horse, for me, I'm not sure we've got to his ceiling yet. Tony, never mind my tracker horse, the only person anyone cares about on the show is you and your tracker horses, Tony. So what have you got for us this week? What have you dug out?
Well, maybe not so much based on this season's ones, but we'll go with Lady Rita, who ran in the maiden hurdle at Fairy House on Saturday. She's quite inexperienced. This was only her second completed start, and the inexperience showed. She can be very keen. So they had to, settle her in the back of mid division to try and get her to drop the bit. Was moderately successful, I suppose. But when she was starting to move into the race 4 out, she made a mistake, which meant the leaders got away from her. But she finished out her race well, despite that keenness, despite that mistake to come third. I'd say the winner, Daily Present, is quite decent. The second isn't too bad. The Gordon Elliott horse, Prevaricate, but she has the option of dropping back against her own sex, which is a big thing. And the form of her first run at Limerick, her penultimate run, her first completed start at Limerick, has also worked out well. So you think a mare's maiden hurdle, for all that those races are competitive in Ireland, would be manageable for her.
Okay, Lady Rita for Tony, very nice indeed. Barry, what have you pulled out for us?
I've gone with Alaphilippe, who ran in the Pertemps race in Warwick on Saturday. Ran keen, travelled very strongly and travelled well right down to 2 out, and was still there with a chance going to the last. It just got tired. Finished 6th, I think, at the finish. But it was his first run for 10 months since the Albert Bartlett at the festival last season, where he split 3 under through 5 and Statler. So I think he's been dropped about £3 by the handicapper. And I'd imagine something like the Pertemps could be a good option for him. He's going to be better for the run. He'd be more relaxed, I'd say, with more cover. And just he's a horse who's 3 from 6 over hurdles, so I think he's still progressive.
Very nice. Alaphilippe for Barry, Lady Rita for me, and Don Levant. Sorry, Jesus, Tony, I was trying to steal your horse there. Lady Rita for Tony, obviously, and Don Levant for me. Those are our tracker horses. That is tracker time done and dusted, and that brings us to an end of this episode of Off the Fence. As always, it's thanks very much to Barry Geraghty and Tony Keenan. Excellent contributions, of course, and tune in next week, where clearly we're going to have loads to talk about. If we see the smash up between Energumene and Shishkin at Ascot, we've got the Winter Millions to dissect as well. Things are just hotting up nicely in January for us. We'll have plenty to discuss, but for now, that was Off the Fence. Thank you very much for watching.